Men who knowingly slept with married women, what pushed you? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. In my early 20s, I just didn't care. My thought process was, it's not me cheating. As I've gotten older, and having since been cheated on, I know that's a way to be. It's not something I want to be a part of doing to anyone else, making them feel the way I did when I found out I was cheated on. Story 2. Just so beautiful. I thought if she was willing to go out on her marriage for me, things must not be right for her. And I'm just so worth it. I imagined that marriage was the mistake, not cheating. Immature me got some validation from my wanton ego. Story 3. There is a guy at my gym who strictly tries sleeping with married women. Knows they won't tell anyone and keeps his cheating on his baby mama on the down low because he doesn't ever bring them home. Story 4. Told me she was leaving an emotionally abusive husband, was splitting up and didn't know how to support her kids without him. All over 6 months. Like I took her in emotionally and did what I could to support her. It was all lie. She had told the same thing to multiple other guys over years, that they were her soulmates. She needed help. She was being abused. And took me 5 years to get over the lies, the manipulation, the cheating, and the emotional mess she left me in. Story 5, I swear. Being married is a kink for some guys. Like they want that married woman to be so hot for them, she's willing to risk it all just for their... I have a friend who almost exclusively dates, washes, and fucks women who are either married or are in long-term relationships. We would joke about it being his kink, but after a couple of years realized that was exactly what was going on. This one woman I was friends with started seeing him on the side. She eventually left her fiancé for him, and then he wanted nothing to do with her anymore. Like she wasn't even attractive to him after she became single. Story 6. Know a guy in his 40s who regularly drives hours to meet up with his high school first two in a hotel room. They sneak BC she's long-term married with kids. He said something to me along the lines of, yeah, I told her she really shouldn't be doing that to her family. Yet he is happy to assist and feels no responsibility. Story 7. Woman told me she was finalizing her divorce, so we started a strictly hookup relationship. 3 months had passed and no update on her divorce, so one day I decided to look her up on Facebook. Well, she had just posted a family pic 3 days ago. Called her out, and she said she's fixing her marriage. Woman, we just hooked up 2 days ago. I don't think you're doing much fixing. We hung out one last time, and I told her she needed to cut me off to fully fix her marriage unless it doesn't as fixing. It's just getting your needs met while putting on a facade. So we ended things. Story 8. I always found it to be easier, honestly, when I was a young guy who didn't care. I always found that a married woman out at the bars without her husband seemed to be out because they wanted to hook up. Like single girls can take a guy home whenever, so there's no rush. But a married woman only has a certain time frame she's able to hook up, so they always seem ready to go. Story 9. Just my wife. I have no idea where or how a married person can find the time to sleep around with someone else. Between work, taking care of the house, cooking, and being with my wife and kid, I barely have time to sleep, much less sleep around. I am an amateur astronomer. My wife knows that once a month, if the weather is good, I leave on a Saturday night and go out a few hours into the middle of nowhere with my telescopes and be all alone surrounded by coyotes and maybe the farm dogs. That's about as exciting as it gets for us. Story 10. I was young. I figured it was her mistake that she had to live with, not mine. At the time, I didn't even really know her husband, and so I wasn't going to complain. A few years later, I got a job at a place and ended up working with the guy. At first, it never really bothered me, but then we started getting along. Found out he was a really decent guy, and I was the pile of shit who slept with his wife. Always told myself that I would tell him, but they ended up having a kid together, and I didn't want to ruin their life. Just something I will always feel guilty about for the rest of my life. Story 11. I didn't really plan on it, but we had both been drinking, and it just kind of happened. She had already begun the separation divorce process before that point, though, so I don't really feel super guilty about it. Story 12. My old friend did, very knowingly. I told him I thought it was not cool, and he replied with, she's the one cheating, not me. So, definitely some justification going on in his head. I think he just had a rare opportunity to get laid and wasn't going to turn it down. Story 13. Like some dudes just don't care about anyone but themselves. They see a chance and they take it. Consequences be damned. Maybe they think they're irresistible, or maybe they just get off on the thrill of it. Either way, it's a scummy move, and it shows a real lack of respect for everyone involved. Story 14. When you marry, you make the biggest promise. Don't ask someone to be there through sickness when you're threatening their health. I'm a woman who has had married men ask for. It's disgusting how they proudly announce what vile, untrustworthy creatures they are, because they chose coming over being an actual partner. I feel the same no matter what gender. Story 15. I spent about 2 years in my late 30s very deliberately only dating and sleeping with married women in ethically open relationships. And while it's been a few years since the last time, I will still occasionally do so. After getting divorced myself and starting to date again, I wasn't ready to start anything serious. So I was trying to date, and I explained to the women I was seeing that I just wanted to stay somewhat casual. However, my style was, and still usually is, to be really intimate, connected, and open up lots of deep conversation in addition to. I find it hard to just be physical because I take a lot of pleasure in really getting to know people in other ways too. Anyway, the result was that I kept finding myself in situations where things got more serious than I intended, and my dates were frustrated and confused that we were getting so close, yet I wasn't ready for any sort of exclusivity or longer commitments. So I decided to only date married women in open relationships. I retooled my profile and searches on dating apps, and use various other forms for meeting polyamorous or otherwise E&M people. And as I met them, I pretty much told them the paragraphs above, and that what I wanted was to be myself with them and have great connections, but know that they already had the life partner, husband, house, kids, etc. to return to and wouldn't want that from me. And it worked quite well. I had some really fun and was able to do it in my style and really had a great time with them. Some were in very happy marriages with the husbands too, whereas some were more in situations where their life with their husband wasn't good, but they had agreements to stay together and get that intimacy elsewhere. Both types were enjoyable in different ways, i.e., you're an insatiable beast that can't get enough of your husband, me, and even other guys' energy with the former type, and I'm the stud that can satisfy you in ways you don't get at home with the latter. Eventually, my needs and availability for different types of relationships evolved, and I opened up to dating single women again. And I've had a range of different relationship structures over the past 15 years, including occasionally still connecting with married women that were ethically non-monogamous. Story 16. Well, I was young. She was my childhood crush and knew each other since we were kids. She married and we reconnected through friends. She started traveling out my way. Lots of mutual friends. She ended up coming on to me. I was shocked, but little me inside was like, oh shit, yo. So we did it, more than once. We didn't become a thing. It got awkward. I still have a lot of care for her, but haven't seen her in over a decade. I hope she's well. She is no longer married for a long time now. Story 17. Nothing had to push me. People make choices. It's not my job to keep another man happy. I don't owe another man anything unless he is a friend, family member, or helping me in business. Other men don't even draw those lines. Most women do not come to cheating very easily. Some do, but most don't. Their husband or boyfriend don't really treat them that well. Main reasons for women to cheat. Her man doesn't listen to them. Man work to make sure needs are met when making love. Man doesn't spend quality time with them. Her man doesn't take her out to do anything. Keep in mind, I'm meeting these needs only hanging out a couple of hours a week. If you're only taking 5 minutes or less, then you're done. Not making dinner occasionally. Not listening to her when she wants to talk. Not fixing something around the house, car. Not taking her anywhere. Not being there when she needs you. I was 20 at the time. This one wife had a kid who wanted to play basketball with people. Let the kid play basketball with me and my friends. She was 28, kid was 10, husband was like 40, worked 12-hour days. She had a nice Benz 600. He didn't work weekends. On the weekends, he spent Saturday playing golf, then hitting the bar, restaurant after. Sundays was gambling and watching football with friends. For months, every Saturday, the husband played golf. It was basketball at the gym from 9 to 11. Then we would chill and do whatever from 11 to 3. Husband never got home before 4. I asked one time, husband works a lot. We could chill other days. She said no. Saturday is the perfect time. It's the time that he could be here, but isn't. Story 18. I didn't know the term at the time, but I instinctively understood her to be a monkey brancher. One who would not leave a relationship without the next one solidly in her grasp. Basically, I thought I had a chance to win her over. Narrator. He did not have a chance to win her over. This episode is one of the very few things I'm ashamed of in my life. I am embarrassed about plenty of things, but I'm ashamed of that. Story 19. When I was 19, I met a 34-year-old woman off a dating app. I was inexperienced, and she was my first kiss, and I lost my virginity to her. At first, everything was great. However, not long after, I found out she was actually married and had a daughter. Unfortunately, she convinced me that she was in an open relationship and that her husband knows everything. We kept hooking up for about another month until one night when we were to meet, she was running late, so I called. She got mad that I tried calling her, and she mentioned her husband was being nosy, but I didn't think much of it. After this incident, I discovered she was separating from her husband, and that's when I figured he found out, and what she told me earlier was a lie. I, of course, feel extremely guilty because I can't stop thinking that I am the reason a little girl out there is growing up without her father. Looking back, all the signs were there. We never met at her house, only motels and her car. We would hook up at weird hours, either during working hours when I was supposed to be in school or late at night. I was such to not see the signs. Story 20. My grandparents and my uncle passed away within a few months. My uncle I saw die from ALS and hit me up. He was 45. I was helping take care of him. That and me spiraling in and out of unmedicated mental illness and psychosis, homelessness left me vulnerable and kind of bitter, apathetic, existential. I dated her first years prior in high school, but I was dirt poor and couldn't even see her when my older friend, 6+ years older, asked if he could date her after taking me to McDonald's. I said yes, but I didn't think she'd go for it. Flash forward 9 years after all the deaths and my failures. They're married, but she starts trying to be my friend. So I'm like, okay. After some weeks of being friends, she tells me they're in the process of being divorced. Then one night she kissed me, and it was all downhill from there. If it helps any, she did the same exact thing to me 10 years later. Never again. Story 21. I didn't make any promises. The only people who can ruin a marriage are the people in the marriage. If your wife comes on to me, you can blame me all you want, but we both know it's only because you're a giant pussy unwilling to accept the truth that you married poorly. Same goes the other way. If your man cheats, he's for the streets. Ain't no point blaming the other lady, guy. Story 22. Since college, I've slept with several married women in the U.S. and abroad. I guess I have my father for showing me the ropes since he slept around on my mother. Kind of complicated since both my parents sometimes were separated more due to work than problems within their relationship. College for me was probably the peak. Looking back, I don't think I purposefully sought that out, but it happened way too often for it to be a fluke. After college, I got a good job that let me travel. Caribbean was a playground and a half. More often than not, they wouldn't tell me they were married, but eventually it came out. All this playing around has totally convinced me that marriage is a folly and a zero-sum game. True love hits so rarely that you shouldn't count on it. Story 23. I never had any real game. I am just terrible with women. But for some reason, I found it easy to talk to women who married in a relationship. It was always the same thing. We'd start as friends, then they would start using me to vent about their relationship, then we'd bang. It was the only way I could get laid. Now that I'm older and married, I see it was a thing to do, but I wouldn't say I have any regrets really. I had fun. They had fun. I never had to deal with husband BF fallout. Story 24. I live in Japan. I'm saying this because some context is key here. The first time it happened, I had no idea until she told me a few months into our arrangement. I contemplated leaving, but by this point, we'd already hooked up several times, so there's no changing the past. Also, I was kind of in a bad place myself and needed this particular arrangement. This would happen to me a few more times, as well as to some of my friends. As it turns out, foreign men in Japan are popular choices for women who want to cheat. We mostly don't speak the local language, and our social circles are completely different, not to mention most guys leave after a few years of living here. So it offers her the highest degree of secrecy, plus she gets the bonus of trying something new and different. One friend was dating a girl. He was serious about her, but we found out that the whole time she secretly had a Japanese boyfriend that she was engaged to. I eventually became okay with it, as most of these women have partners who aren't interested in them sexually. Many of these guys are probably stepping out on their own. Cheating culture in Japan is different. People will still get upset, for the most part, if it's found out, but people are far more willing to look the other way, so long as everything is kept discreet. Right now, I have a side hustle as an erotic massage therapist, and the vast majority of my clients are married. I'd say 30–40% of them are there with the knowledge and blessing of their husbands. Some of them even get the money for it from their husbands. Here you go. Have fun. Story 25. It didn't take much pushing. I was in my 20s and 30s, and it was fun. We were already good friends, and she initiated, so I felt zero guilt. Years later, she told me that she and her husband had been going through rough times, and our affair kept her happy and saved her marriage, so I actually feel pretty good about it. Story 26. When I was 16, my friend's uncle's wife was having problems conceiving, so she thought it'd be a good idea to have teenage me knock her up on the sly. When I was 19 and enlisted and deployed in the military, I saw all sorts of affairs and infidelity, to the point I thought divorce was an unwritten requirement to be promoted to NCO. For me, it was one of those things where society says it expects one thing, but when you look around, everyone is doing shady shit. I wasn't willing to compromise on matters of the heart, so I learned to play the practical game of love, where there are no rules, as the saying goes. Story 27 I used to before I got into my current relationship. It started in college, sleeping with taken women, other guys' GFS, married women, fiancés. First time was by accident, met a girl at a party in college. While hooking up, she told me I was bigger than her BF. That turned me on. She didn't tell me before we were doing it that she had a BF FYI. She kept talking dirty, etc. Turns out I love that, knowing she's with some other guy, but here she is riding me. We kept hooking up a lot, all while having a BF. Started only looking for girls with BFS and or married, online, etc. In my late 20s, realized what a piece of shit I was being and stopped altogether hooking up. Wasn't looking for it, but met my current girl and been together years now. Story 28. When I was 21 in my first proper job after uni, I was warned by my manager that I'd receive a lot of attention from the women, mostly age 40 plus. I didn't really figure as I'm nothing special. What I didn't understand until later in life, that she wasn't saying it because I was attractive, but rather because all these middle-aged women were going through divorces or problematic marriages, and I would appeal as easy pickings for them. Needless to say, she was right. I began getting many messages, including nudes and very suggestive, aggressive messages. As a young cub, I didn't have the willpower or self-discipline to say no. I indulged. What surprised me was how vanilla most of the women were in the bedroom compared to girls of similar age to myself. I assume it's based on older women at the time being more faithful to one partner, marriage at young ages, etc., and so weren't as experienced or experimental. One lady even bribed me around with the promise of a Chinese takeaway and a new iPad. Story 29. She got married at 17 and said they were in process of divorce. Thankfully, she wasn't lying and apparently had texted her, now ex-husband, in advance that she was hooking up with me so he wouldn't come home during. Still, she was a coworker, and I was fresh out of a breakup. Learned the valuable lessons of not shitting where I eat and a grace period after breaking up LMAO. Story 30. My buddy who migrated to Florida, West Coast Gulf area, worked at shore bars, and he mentioned that he wouldn't know they were married until he woke up the next day and saw the sunburned outline ring finger. I've never forgot that one. Quick story. He once woke up with a married woman who had no idea where she was or who he was. She turns over and says, "Who the are you?" Then started flipping out. Story 31. I've almost done this a few times. The reason each time I didn't do it was because I actually liked the person and would have not ever been able to trust them in a relationship if they cheated on the other person. Ethically, I'm not opposed to hooking up with someone in a relationship. That's between them and the person they're dating, you're married to, whatever. They're the one with the obligation and the agreements to not get naked with someone else, not me. Story 32. It's hard to pinpoint one specific reason, was more a combination of things. The context sort of lent itself to a flirty environment. I never really thought she'd go for it, and I don't think she did either, but just sort of kept up the flirting for the fun of it, and all of a sudden it was happening. There was also a bit of a multi-layered forbidden element to it. She was a good deal older than me, which was unique and fun, and I'd be lying if I said the idea of her being married and taking a risk to be with me was not a part of it too. Ultimately, those factors converged, and you only live once mindset took over. Story 33. When I was in my late 20s, I was recently divorced and mad at the world. I slept with a few married women. It seemed like more of a challenge to hook up with a married woman. Something about seeing if I could befriend them until they were fighting with their husbands was such a challenge. So I did it. Most never even talked or admitted to it. I learned that they usually wouldn't talk about it after it happened. For years, I only chased married women with no regrets. Now, after many more years, I am not proud of the person I was then. I regret it all and shouldn't have ever done it. Yes, my next wife cheated and broke me. It was deserved. I know that now. For me, it was just the thrill of it. I was a total loser. Story 34. Well, the libido of my early and mid-20s, combined with being blatantly lied to, have gotten the hat trick of we are separated and he is moving out. We are divorced and have been for some time. And yes, I'm single even though we still live together. Go figure, all three of their husbands were unaware of these developments in their marriages. They all also seemed nice enough that they wouldn't lie about that to me, as it would be very up to do so. I was very naive, lol. Otherwise, it never would have happened. Cheating sucks, and I'd never wish that pain on another person, let alone me knowingly causing it. I've wisened up since then. If there is another man involved at all in any capacity, that seems murky as far as relationship status. 99% chance you are being lied to, and he very much sees them as still together. Story 35, I was honestly extremely depressed. My wife and I were in the worst of the bad times, and this woman treated me like a king. She was attentive, talkative, complimentary. She paid attention to me publicly. In group settings, she acted as if I was the most interesting man in the room. Both of our relationships were in bad shape. I was freshly cheated on, but my wife was in denial that I knew and hadn't taken any sort of responsibility. She finally did after it all came out. That ended a long line of transgressions, and my wife and I actually did figure it out. 6 years later, we're happier than ever. The woman I got with, not so much. See, shortly after she was suddenly and enthusiastically overcome by guilt and told her husband. She told him I seduced her, etc., WTF, that she tried to resist and dissuade me, but I just wouldn't give up and somehow convinced her. I realized immediately that I've been used to burn this poor son of a bitch who married her. Thing is, they'd been together for a decade. Her husband had seen it before, called her on her shit, and left. They got divorced. She did find a new guy and get remarried and seems much happier now. Her husband, somewhere out there, still wants me dead as far as I know. I did face him and was fully ready for it to get physical, but he just got in my face and told me he'd kill me one day and to watch my back. Haven't seen him since. Told Dr. Boyfriends will kick your ass. Husbands will kill you. Story 36, it was exciting at the time. Unfortunately, I got emotionally manipulated at the same time by her in hindsight. She has been unhappy for years with her marriage, practically abandoned by her husband for his career. She doesn't really want for anything and is quite well off, but there is no intimacy regarding talking about feelings or she told me that she wanted to be with me, and like a dam I fell for her hard. But she eventually waned interest, was too busy to see me. Things popped up that stopped her, told me that she needed to see me tomorrow, only tomorrow would never come, and I'd wasted my time being patient for her again. The last message I ever received was her saying, "Good night, X," and I never ever replied to that message. 6 months on, and I still think about her. Last night, I even dreamed we were back in touch, only to wake up and find my phone empty. Would I sleep with another married woman? Probably, but my emotions are locked off and brick-walled, and I won't allow myself to fall in love so willingly again, I think. Story 37, I've never cheated in any relationship in my life, except for once when I was dating someone and kissed another woman. I told my girlfriend the next day, I'm not a cheater, so I daff about sleeping with a married woman BC. I'm not the one cheating. I've had a decent number of relationships with married women and women in relationships where they were living with the guy. They obviously weren't getting what they needed. Like some would tell me how their partner didn't even pay attention to them, let alone physically even touch them. I'm in 40s and this happens more now, to me, than ever. I'm not good looking or anything. I'd say I'm a solid 6'10". Very important to never tell anyone what's going on. I've honestly wondered if some of these women have other married women that I can keep my mouth shut, but I've never been able to connect any of them in any way to explain that. Story 38. Because I wanted to, didn't care and was horny, ultimately saw it as their decision. Maybe I am the exception here. Not having such strong moral compass or not sure what's the point of pretending on an anonymous site. There is no one general answer to these questions. People lie, cheat, and very often act selfishly for different reasons. But we can also be caring, have empathy, compassion, and it could be the same person acting differently throughout their life or differently towards different people. Things, life, people are not black and white. I embrace this thought. Makes life more interesting, meaningful. You can't grow without failure and disappointment, and sometimes you're the source of failure and disappoint others. In some stories, you'll inevitably be the antagonist. Best you can do is to reflect on it and try bettering that behavior, so then you can screw up something else. Story 39. The main reason is I initially was flirted with without knowing. After knowing it's not my responsibility to be faithful, and the way I see it, if it's not me, it will be another. I'm speeding up the breakup that would happen anyway, with the added benefit I might find a GF wife. Also, most guys don't get many opportunities. If you pass on them, you will pass on life. I can understand to some, that's a bad way to start a relationship, not to me and many others. I've been cheated with, and I cheated. In both cases, we looked for it. And if it didn't happen in that moment, it would in another. It never has anything to do with the third person and always due to unmet needs and lack of communication. Story 40. She aggressively pursued me and wore down my morals. It's hard to say no to someone throwing themselves at you when you're on a dry streak. I was weak. I was in college doing student teaching. She was the teacher I was working under. She invited me to grab coffee after one of my student teaching sessions to tell me to not become a teacher. She went into how miserable she was with her career, and that turned to how she was unhappy with her marriage. Then story 41, nothing pushed me. The truth is, I've worked in corporate jobs that were complete whorehouses. I didn't care if they were married because I was single. The married women I've hooked up with should have said no and moved it along, or not even engaged with me at all. It seems harsh to state that because there wasn't anything that pushed me and I really didn't care. But that's the truth. The only time I cared was when one husband found out and showed up to our campus with a bat. He beat the crap out of the car that he thought was mine. Not only was it not mine, but it wasn't remotely close to my car. This was back in 2003, and I drove a cosmic blue Toyota Matrix. The car he beat up was a gray Civic or something. Story 42, never slept with one, made out with one. She was in the club with her girls and gay bestie. Didn't know she was married at first. She had a few and was ready to wild out. Once I found out, can't say I cared. It was clear the marriage was 100% over. Maybe the guy cheated or who knows what, but obviously it was a revenge tour, and the friends didn't seem to care that much. I mean, my thinking was, she's probably going to screw somebody, so whatever. That said, not much happened beyond sloppy antics in the club. Story 43, nothing. Women enjoy new adventures, and it's that simple. We're older and exciting experiences are enticing. After being blindsided with things that lead to my own divorce, it's easy for me to spot women in a similar frame of mind as my ex-wife. This might hurt some people's sensibilities, but that's life. Both women I've seen are actually still married. And I think the relationship they have with their husband would suffer more if they had been with some jackass that promised them unrealistic happiness if they left. It's easier for me to relate to a married woman. I love women though, married or not. Story 44. I was at a low point in my life. My ex had left me. My best friend almost immediately slept with them. And I stopped actively looking for relationships and focused on work, which is where I met her. She was funny, smart, beautiful, way out of my league, and it took me a long time to even realize she was flirting with me. Things got physical once I did realize she was making moves, but it ultimately ended badly for several reasons. It led in part to my seeking new employment, but I don't wholly regret it, which is the bad part. It is addicting, really, to be desired and pursued when you don't have a high opinion of yourself. It was such an unexpected experience. Also, she said she was in an open relationship, but I'll never know for a fact. Story 45. I never got involved with married women. In fact, I stayed clear of any women who were in a relationship. But if you suppose is faithful to you, because some dude have morals, you up. If someone is going to cheat, let them cheat as early as possible so you don't invest any more time to that relationship. Story 46. She was getting divorced, already moved back in with her parents, didn't want to actually date anyone, and knew I don't date women with kids, so we had some fun. She actually did get divorced. We're still great friends, and she now has a dude who takes care of her way better than her husband ever did. I feel no guilt at all. See, in my case, she actually wasn't lying, just still legally married. Story 47, they pushed me. The first time I was technically illegal to them, there was a desire. And quite frankly, what I learned to be a fetish for some women to teach younger guys things. It created something in me that throughout my 20s and beyond that, I never avoided married women. I almost exclusively attracted them TBH for a period in my life. Part of what made me so attractive to them was the ability to compartmentalize what we were doing and not allow it to get out of hand and keep things in perspective. The other part is probably my attention to detail when I meet really anyone, but women love when you have their undivided attention and how it makes them feel to be seen, heard, and not judged. Also helps if you're able to tickle the funny bone. It all started with a pilot's wife who was never home and never showed his wife affection. Toe, the wife who was separated from her attic husband, who was a danger to their son. Tokoifiu, a wife who just wasn't sexually pleased by her husband. To, a wife who just wanted to feel alive again as she'd just been in a rut. It goes on, but those are just a few scenarios I experienced. There are so many stories I could share, but too much to type. But I'll add there was only one scenario that got ugly, and that was due to the fact the woman hid the fact she was married as I ended it. I told her had she been transparent, we could have continued without all the messiness. But even though she was a bit older than me, 8 waters, it ended abruptly. Story 48. She confided in me for a long time that she had emotionally exited the marriage and he had been sneaking around, but she acted oblivious for her son's sake. She was my employee, and I was in love with her for a while before, but never had pursued. I eventually told her she deserved to be happy and I would love the chance to have a relationship. They divorced quickly after, and she is my wife now of 7 years, and he is my son. Story 49, I guess technically they were still married. She was older than me, early 30s. I was in my mid-20s at the time. They had separated and she was in the middle of getting her own apartment when we met at a bar. She was there with her other single friend, both dressed for and out to meet guys. I was very much just someone for her to sleep with while she was dealing with her marriage already in shambles. The husband was also seeing someone else. We broke up later because she wasn't interested in being in a serious relationship with me, and that was about the time the divorce was finalized. I looked her up later, and she seemed to be in a stable relationship with a guy her age after moving out of state. I'm happy for her, and I don't feel guilty about it. She never lied to me, and I think I was just what she wanted, needed at a tumultuous time in her life. Story 50, I feel like I kind of did. She was separated for 2 weeks, gave me 4 years of a good relationship, and ditched me for someone else on a whim without talking to me. But then again, she was engaged 3 times, cheated on them all with the next guy she then engaged to. She married one of them. Her parents paid $30K for their wedding. She left him 7 weeks after the marriage and then got with me. I didn't actually know all that at first, except that she was separated, so I didn't care. So what pushed me was that she was awesome and liked everything I did. What sucked was that she got tired of liking the things I did. Let's just say she doesn't actually like commitment. She wanted to lust, the fun with the illusion of being serious. Story 51. I'm glad this popped up because I've been asking myself the same thing. I have low self-esteem and low self-worth. Combine those two, and I tend to flirt with anyone who looks my way. You can't have standards if you don't value yourself. Unfortunately, this seems to be a lot of married women and unhappy poly women who want another partner. This has caused me a lot of issues in my life, including a divorce. We both had our issues and are back to being friends. And a rather messy breakup with my ex-fiancé. I'm working on myself so that I don't keep making these bad decisions. TLDR, low standards and low self-worth led me to not feeling worthy of a partner who is not already unhappy. Story 52, she posted the ad on Craigslist. I just showed up. 3 separate occasions. One time I knew beforehand, one time I didn't. One time it was planned that I know. I was a bull in a cuck thing. To be honest, it never occurred to me that I was betraying some dude integrity, because if their significant other is already at the point where they are willing to go that far, then she was never your girl. It was just your turn. I left that lifestyle behind in 2008. I think I'm better for it now. I had a lot of therapy and battled a lot of anxiety in the years since my frivolous behavior, but nothing ever came of it. Except her, always. Story 53, my husband accidentally did when he was 20. He met a 27-year-old woman at the bar, small military town, and the bar allowed 18 plus. They hooked up for 2 weeks until she started acting really weird. She was saying she wanted children with him, and she wanted to get married. She would even go into detail about what their future children would look like. He was like, "Yay, no, I just met you." So he stopped talking to her and told her exactly why. A month later, her husband, who he had no idea about, started harassing him. I guess the lady confessed to her husband, but made it out like they were madly in love, and she was going to leave him to pursue a relationship. The guy was demanding to know everything and refused to believe what my husband had to say. They both started stalking my husband, were putting nails in his tires. They were even stealing his packages and trying to lure him to their house to come get them. My husband's aunt is an attorney, so he had her threaten them, and they stopped. I did not know my husband when this all happened, but it made him very paranoid when he met new people after that. He told me he ran a background check on me when we first met. Story 54. I was young. She was the definition of my type. She approached me, and at the time I felt, and honestly kind of still feel, that I don't owe the spouse a thing. Don't even know the guy. It's his wife that should be practicing loyalty. Now I'm in my 30s, and I 100% would never do that again. It didn't end badly at all, so it wasn't even a negative experience, and the was real good. But you get a bit older, and you realize that even if you don't know the person, you shouldn't be that guy. Also, as I've had more and more friends go through divorces or the breakdown of long-term relationships due to infidelity, I've realized men can crash out violently, and I don't need that in my life, LMO. Story 55, not married but was in a long-term relationship. Her boyfriend was a reckless, abusive drug addict, kind of dude to get drunk while barred out on Xanax and crash his car. We met through mutual friends at a live stream concert, hit it off immediately and found each other attractive. Absolute bombshell of a woman. Not my proudest moment, but their relationship was deteriorating, so I didn't feel bad about it at the time. Story 56, I'll be honest. She had me convinced I was her soulmate. We met 15 years ago, crushed on each other, never hooked up because she was dating someone. She broke up with him. I was married, but then divorced. We started hooking up. She told me she loved me, and things were done with him. We dated on and off for 10 months, but she was always distant. Times together were magical, like amazing, and then laying in bed all day talking. Turned out she was still dating him. I gave an ultimatum. 3 months later, she was engaged, but kept talking to me, telling me she loved me, etc., etc. One thing turned to another, and she got married, and we slept together a few times till I said I wasn't doing it anymore. Whole time she was telling me she loved me and was going to leave him. I broke it off. She just lied and manipulated me to get what she wanted and turned me into a piece of shit for sleeping with her in the process. Story 57, I'm overall not great with women, had lots of difficulties in my own relationships, and most haven't worked out long-term because I haven't developed enough skill to have much option in my dating life. But I'm fairly successful and interesting and not terrible looking. So married women my age who are in the doldrums of their relationships tend to find me wildly attractive. So it's happened more than once, and pretty much always as awful as it sounds. Wish it were different, and I'm hopeful for the future. I'm getting lots of help for many of my underlying issues in the very near future. Here's hoping I can be happier and less disruptive going forward. Story 58, first one, was an old ex who I had been on and off with, and recently heard that she was engaged. Not that that's any better, but I figured she'd call it off with him after realizing she's totally not ready to be in a marriage. Then found out she was married after, and it kind of shocked me. But I don't think I would have refrained even if I knew from the beginning. My thought process was something like this. If anyone is willing to cheat, they aren't ready to be married. And if someone's wife isn't ready to be married, it's the guy's fault for having poor judgment and choosing someone who'd ruin it. And it should end. And it's better for it to end sooner than later. Someone will come along and ruin it. You're welcome for saving you a few more years of connection before realizing she isn't the one. It will end way quicker now. Story 59, only slept with one married woman, but truthfully, the fact that we were both looking for something mostly physical at the time for starters. Her husband cheated initially several years before. Their marriage had gotten to the point where they were essentially roommates sharing a house only because they had a kid together still in junior high. She wasn't getting affection from him, and I wasn't getting affection from anyone. I had convinced myself that it wasn't that big of a deal, and we were two people satisfying the wants, needs of the other. I know none of that makes it excusable. Story 60, almost happened to me. She, 38, was my 20 work wife. For about a year and a half, always told me that if she were younger, she 100% would be with me. I told her it didn't matter, and we kissed. We talked about it and almost did it, but she had a family emergency and had to go back to her country. Looking back, it's something that, even though I would have enjoyed it at the time, it's something I would have regretted.